Hey everybody, it's Ty here. Lots happened since the last time we talked about the lower 48 outside of the tropical manner here. Before, we had maybe a couple slight risk and a marginal mixed in. These other days were not there until early this morning. We had the addition of several days within the 4 to 8 day time frame that are now with slight risk for severe weather. And it's kind of going just as we had predicted with the June outlook, where we would start to see more of the focus of severe weather shifting towards the northern states. While the southern states can still see their share of action, I think we're going to start to see a little bit more activity over towards the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, etc. here. And as we look over the course of this run here, of course, looking at tonight's enhanced risk, main threat is hail, damaging winds, and maybe an isolated tornado possible there. But if we go further into the day 2, day 3 outlook, you'll notice a common correlation here of these northern states starting to get more and more into the action. This is due in large part to a big pattern shift that we're actually beginning to go through now. There's going to be more troughing up towards the northern states. More ridging actually could be occurring over here towards the eastern states. So while we'll still have high pressure and plenty of heat, this may not necessarily slow down the storms here. But with the troughing that we're going to start to see here, activity is going to begin to increase over toward these northern states and even into North America, aka Canada in this case. So plenty of activity still left to go here as we go throughout our severe season, but we may begin to see a slowdown towards some of these southern plain states. However, given the time of year and the amount of energy that's usually over this area, there's still going to be more opportunities for severe weather. Again, here's the 4 to 8 day outlook here. Days 4 through 6 have severe weather setups stretching all the way from Dakotas here into Minnesota, into Iowa, Nebraska, and even stretching all the way over towards Illinois, which includes Chicago at this point right now. Unclear at this point, particularly what the hazard types are. I'd lean towards damaging wind. This is usually what we would end up seeing during this time of year, but hence this is why we look at the model data as well. So normally in this case, I would try to do a model comparison between GFS and Euro, but there's actually some decent agreement between the two for right now. So I'm going to let it be. As things change, we may do further updates where we incorporate both. But to keep this video short, we're going to stick with GFS for today. But you can already kind of see it beginning to occur here. We're starting to see more and more short waves beginning to pop up on the northern side of the Rockies here. And then eventually we start to see the troughs begin to come in here as well, especially as we get into next week. This is when we get to that 4 to 6 day range where we have those slight risks back to back to back. Here's a trough right here. Now, one thing I will say is that these troughs are not the little mega trough, the huge mega troughs that we were seeing towards like March, April, and early parts of May. But these are still going to be ample troublemakers in their own right here. Now, there are a couple that I'm watching as we go even further into range here once we get past the 8 day time frame. Now, keep in mind, looking at this time frame and beyond here, there is a lot that I'm taking it with a grain of salt here, and you should too, because the simple fact is the further out we go into range, the harder it is to predict things, and the less model data you even have available to compare it to. But fact in the matter is, though, within the course of these next couple of weeks here, I expect business to pick up as a whole over towards the northern states. Now, one thing that we're also going to be keeping an eye on, of course, is this ridge over here. This ridge is also going to be allowing warm, moist air to come into play as well. So this is where we're going to get our moisture coming in from these areas here. Excuse me. And then our lifting mechanism is going to be based a little bit more off of these troughs here. Like I said, I also think that we're going to have some parts of Saskatchewan and Canada here that could be a point of interest as well. So there may be a chance that we end up doing some streams over towards Canada as well. So to anyone that's interested in that, definitely make sure you get that notification bell on, because those will be coming soon, especially since my work season here is about to come to an end for the spring season. And I may have a little bit of time on my hands. We'll see what happens with that. I also have a little secondary job that I'm trying to do right now with that. But again, we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis in particular towards the northern states here over the course of these next few weeks. So if we were to go ahead and take a look at the 700 millibar, it's pretty similar to what we were seeing at the 500 here. Kind of hammering down the hazard types little by little with this here. Like I said, I'm really leaning towards damaging wind threat, especially as we go into next week, especially over towards Iowa and then over towards Illinois as well. But I do think that with the way the troughs are set up, I can't rule out a few tornadoes. This probably might be one of the better setups with this. We'll have to see what the low-level jet is really doing at this point in order to truly see if we can have any sort of inkling as to what to expect there. And here is that low-level jet map while we're at it. And like I said, during this time of year, unless you get a really stout trough, you don't really get a whole lot of low-level jet. But with this trough that we have here, it doesn't really take a whole lot. We're getting areas where we're getting up to that 20 to 30 knot threshold here, which is usually what you would be looking for. So I'm not going to say ring the alarm or anything like that, but might be something worth paying a little bit closer attention to going forward. And then as these more stout troughs come in, we'll have to see how things kind of pan out with that. Like I said, depending on how this turns out, mainly with the wind direction, will determine a lot of what's next. I really think damaging winds will still be the main threat at this point, more so than the hail threat by a long shot, especially as we get further into range as of right now. Because if in case you missed it with the 500 millibar, the further we got in the range, the stronger those troughs got. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this back one more time. We're looking back at 500 again. And what you'll notice is I want you to look towards this region here. I drag this along here. Look at how those troughs begin to deepen in their amplitude here. So that's another thing we're going to have to pay pretty close attention to going forward. So another key component when it comes to severe weather, of course, is moisture. And we have plenty to work with here. We have Gulf moisture, and then we also have the crops that will do transpiration, or corn sweat as we call. And this will allow these states a little bit further up towards the north that won't get that same rich Gulf moisture to have plenty of moisture available to it. So really strong moisture returns coming into play, getting into the 60s and 70s here as a whole pretty easily and throughout the entire model run here. So it's not even really a question of moisture. The shear's kind of there as well, and the energy is going to be there to go along with it. Usually during this time of year, we have some of the most impressive instability numbers that you will see in a season. In fact, this is just looking into Sunday night here. Look at how much instability we have over here towards South Dakota. We're sitting almost at 5,000 joules per kilogram on surface Cape. Put in perspective for you, I've seen severe weather happen at 500. So we're 10 times past the absolute minimum. For a decent severe weather event, 1,000 has been proven to be more than plenty, depending on other parameters here. But we're kind of in the time of year where we're dealing with what we call high cape, low shear events, where we have so much energy in the atmosphere, it's almost like a powder keg, and it wouldn't take a whole lot in the way of wind shear to get strong to severe storms, even the threat of tornadoes from this, if all of the parameters are there. They don't always have to be, not every parameter in particular always has to be souped up all the way to like 20 per se, or on a scale of 0 to 10 basically. But if we were to keep going forward with this, what you'll notice is that energy just continues to kind of resurge and recycle over these areas as we continue to go throughout the course of the model run. So it just further highlights the area of interest as we go forward. Eventually, I do expect that area to move a little bit further towards the east, and we'll be paying a little bit more attention maybe over towards the Mississippi River Basin and Missouri River regions before maybe getting into the Ohio Valley here, maybe the deep south once again to maybe close out the month. So with all those ingredients that we've looked at in place, this is just basically a rough look at what we could be dealing with as we go further down the line. So one thing about it is even though the deep south itself isn't expecting severe weather, we're still going to see plenty of summertime thunderstorms over here. The reason I make mention of this is, of course, with me being in the landscape industry and maybe a few others that are watching here being there, always need to be watchful throughout the course of the day, especially as we get into peak daytime heating hours between 2 and 5 o'clock. Usually, we'll start to see those early signs of thunderstorms. So, you see those little cumulus towers beginning to rise. Always keep an ear open for thunder because it can happen quickly. We've already had a few instances of that earlier this year, and we're going to continue to see that going forward. You can kind of see these storms kind of firing off over here as well. Then as we go further along here, you can see the increase in activity over towards those northern plains states. And then eventually we'll see even a little bit of Canadian action there as well. This system itself, as we get into the latter half of next week, could be a small problem over towards Ontario as well, maybe even Toronto, before all is said and done here. And then we continue to see more and more storm systems beginning to occur over here towards the northern plains here. Deep south starts to slow down just a little bit for the moment, but of course we're further out in range, so not going to put a whole lot of emphasis on this just yet. But you can see that storm track has kind of remained consistent, and a little bit more in the way of those pesky summer showers and storms continue to remain over the deep south and Ohio Valley going forward. So plenty to still keep track of, maybe not as significant as what we were seeing earlier in the year, which truthfully that's fine because we had some pretty nasty storms. But even though I wouldn't say that this is one of those end of the world outbreak scenarios, not like we've really had one of those worst case scenarios, not too many of those worst case scenarios, don't let your guard down. That's really the point that I'm trying to drive home. But that being said here, hope you guys enjoyed this video and you found it useful. Make sure you hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, get the notification bell on for all future videos and streams, and I'll see you next time.